welcome to DIY with Nancy. Today I'm going to share my recipe for Bolo Pudim. It's a pudding cake. It's so amazingly delicious, and how this cake comes together, it just still amazes me. I love it. It's a very moist cake, so it's half cake, half pudding. The cake is so moist. You get some caramel sauce into the actual cake. It's a delight to have, and I'm going to show you how to make my Bolo pudding cake step by step. Now, for the first step, I'm going to start off with the base of making the caramel. I have a medium-sized saucepan. I'm placing 1 cup of granulated sugar. I have the heat on a medium heat, and I'm just going to keep my eye on the sugar until it's dissolved before I add my next ingredient. Now, as you can see, the sugar is dissolved. You can see a nice caramel color. And once it's at this point, I'm going to add half a cup of water. And I'm going to add the water gradually, consistently stirring it. And once I've added all of my water, I'm going to just make sure it's stirred together, well combined. I'm going to let it come to a quick boil for about a minute or two, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it cool. I've added all of the water, and then at that point, I've let it come to a boil for about a minute or two. And now at this point, once it comes to a boil, I'm going to turn off the heat, and I'm going to set aside the caramel and let it thicken for about 4 or 5 minutes before I place it into the cake pan. I've set aside the caramel, it's thickened. Now I'm ready to place it into the cake pan. And all I'm doing is placing it into the cake pan, and as you can see, I'm just twirling around the cake pan to make sure that the caramel is coated on the sides and the bottom of the pan, just like that. Once I have my prepared bake pan, I'm going to set it aside and move on to the next step. Moving on to the next step, I'm going to prepare the dry ingredients for the chocolate cake. Now in a sifter, I'm going to place 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, half a cup of cocoa powder, which I'm just going to add it in as well. And I'm going to add the salt, and I have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And the last dry ingredient will be 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And I'm just going to measure it and place it right in there. And I'm just going to sift it right into the bowl. And that way all I have to do is add it all at once to my wet ingredients. So I'm going to set it aside. Now for the next step, I'm going to use my stand mixer, and I'm going to start off by placing 3 eggs into the mixing bowl. And to that, I'm going to add 3/4 cups of granulated sugar. I've added my whisk attachment to do the mixing. I'm going to place my mixer on high speed, let it mix for about 2 minutes. And after the 2 minutes, you should end up with a fluffy and creamy mixture, just as you see it here. Now at this point, I'm going to reduce the mixer to a medium speed, and I'm going to add a 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. To that, I'm adding half a cup of milk. I'm using 2% milk. You can use whole milk as well. And I'm also adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Let that mix together. And once you've let that combine for about 40 seconds or so, at that point, you're ready to add your dry ingredients. Now, to avoid any spillage of my dry ingredients, I'm going to remove the attachment, just pour it right into the wet ingredients. I just find it so much easier, no spillage. Now I'm going to place my whisk attachment back on, and I'm going to place the mixer on a medium speed. Let the dry ingredients mix in with the wet ingredients. You don't want to overmix this batter. After about a minute of mixing, my chocolate batter seems ready, and there it is. I'm ready to move on to the next step. Now moving on to the next step, I'm going to make the pudding. And I'm using a medium-sized bowl, and I'm placing 1 can, 300 milliliters of sweetened condensed milk. Next, I'm going to add 600 milliliters of milk. I'm using 2% milk, but you can use whole milk for this recipe. And for the last ingredient, I'm adding 4 eggs. And I'm just going to mix the eggs well, combine them in the bowl before I add it to the condensed milk and milk mixture. And then once I've added it in, Last thing you need to do is make sure the mixture is well combined, and then we're ready for the next step. Now I'm ready to bring it together. We have the cake pan with the caramel, the chocolate cake batter, and the pudding. I'm going to start off by first placing the chocolate cake batter into the pan with the caramel. So we're going to place it right inside the cake pan. I'm going to move it around, make sure the batter is evened out. And for the next step, I'm going to place the pudding mixture right on top of the cake batter, and I'm going to pour it slowly right on top, just like that. For the next step, I'm going to use a square oven-safe tray to place my pudding cake in. And I'm going to prepare a water bath. So what I'm going to do is I have about 4 cups of boiling water, and I'm going to pour it right into the tray. Now I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. At this point, the pudding cake is ready to go in the oven. I'm going to bake it at 350 degrees for about 50 to 55 minutes. My Bolo pudding cake is out of the oven, and at this point I'm going to let it cool down completely, and then I'm going to place it in the refrigerator for about 4 hours. The pudding cake is now cooled and set in the refrigerator for 4 hours, and with a paring knife I'm just loosening the cake from the edges of the pan, also doing the same thing for the center. Now I like to shake the cake pan just to give it a little nudge and loosen up the pudding cake before I place it onto my cake platter. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold the bottom of the cake pan and put my other hand on the top of the cake plate and gently flip it over, just like that. And there you have it, a beautiful Bolo pudding cake. And it's an absolute beautiful dessert that you can place on your dessert table. And there you have it. Bolo Pudim, a pudding cake, half pudding, half cake. The way this cake comes together still amazes me to this day, but the way it tastes, it's absolutely delicious. It's the flavor combination of the pudding and the cake. Oh, it's so good. And it's not hard to make. Honestly, the pudding and the chocolate, what a combination. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching how to make this recipe with me today. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Take care.